For those who don't know me, I'm Gemma. I head up the real estate commercial team, and we are rounding off the day joined by a star-studded lineup. There will be a chance for questions at the end, so please do keep your thinking caps on throughout. But today's panel brings together 4 very different perspectives from within the property and retail ecosystem, each working within very different contexts, but grappling with the same challenge which we've spoken about today. Predicting consumer behaviours is never straightforward, and so how do we create places that remain relevant, resilient, and valuable in a rapidly changing environment? So we are joined by Stuart Fyfe from Canary Wharf Group, Will Minnett from McArthurGlen, Simon Morris from GCW, and our very own Lily Payne. To kick proceedings off, please do introduce yourself. We'll go from right down to left, and tell me what consumer trends are you watching this year and which you're not reacting to.
Hi everyone, I'm Lily, as Gemma said. The trends that come to mind mostly, I would say, centre around sort of health, well-being, self-care, whether that comes through sort of protein-packed lunches, or even being more conscious of our fibre intake when we're using grab-and-go food, as well as then leaning on the other side of it being sort of more of that treat culture. And I, for one, personally hope that those two are something here to endure, either combating sort of perhaps negative dieting culture with nutrient-packed foods, as well as then being able to pick up sort of like an oat milk matcha,
like a treat, you know me.
Or something from Gales, you know, or some fried chicken. Do you know what I mean? Lots of fun treats. But I think the overarching piece there is thinking about how we indulge ourselves, whether it's convenience-led, sort of health-led, and some of the hierarchical things that the girls were talking about.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Lily.
Yeah, so I think my overarching observation probably of the market, I'm probably in a fortunate position that I cover retail, leisure and hospitality for Canary Wharf Group, or as we were called from last week, CWG, imaginatively. And I think there's a lot of parallels between the two, but the overarching observation, I think Jess actually mentioned it in her presentation, is investment. And I think if you're a landlord that's able to invest in your environment, expanding your offer, or you're a retailer who's able to invest in your fit out or a leisure concept, or even hotels, I think these are generally the winners in the market, those people that have the ability to invest. And obviously some challenges in the market with bank finance and geopolitical pressures. Looking at each sector very quickly independently, I think retail, and the vast majority of the people in the room are in the retail sector. I think the retail sector is definitely in a much better place than it was this time last year. I see a lot more entrepreneurial spirit coming into it. There was a period of time where I felt that retail was becoming showrooms. That was just basically a showroom for the website, and they were basically trying to get you in to then redirect you to the website. I see imaginative fit-outs coming through. The winners are getting bigger. But that doesn't mean there's necessarily barriers to entry. If you look at something like Active, where Lululemon's been at the top of its game for a long time, but it's not stopping Fury or Alo Yoga coming in and challenging them quite successfully. But they're doing it with retail and with digital. And then you've got examples like K-Beauty, which has been around for a couple of years, but are really getting a massive foothold in London and expanding nationally, that you're seeing come through. That there's a lot of an entrepreneurial spirit come there. Takeaway food, I think the presentation beforehand pretty much nailed it actually, and I don't think we need to go through protein or matcha again because I think everyone will mention it. But I think it's much more encouraging, the takeaway food sector today. I mean, probably this time last year, or certainly 2 years ago, there was a real lack of new ideas coming through and new concepts coming through that the Canary Wharf customer and others were probably getting very bored of, and there wasn't a sort of huge amount of new concepts, new menus, new brands coming through. And I think people like Salad Kitchen, people like Salad Project in Canary Wharf, huge, and obviously in the matcha sector we mentioned Blank Street and Genki, absolutely huge in terms of their drive. Looking just quickly at other sectors, I mean, I think the leisure sector is very interesting. Most people have probably been to Voyage with ABBA. that is the disruptor in the market that has changed a
been
lot
twice.
of things. Been twice. We obviously did Hunger Games with Troubadour Theatres in Canary Wharf, which is a huge step forward for us and putting us on the cultural map, but a disruptor that's taking people out of the West End to come to these immersive experiences. And there's a huge amount of entrepreneurial spirit in there, which is challenging as a landlord to work out how successful they're going to be or otherwise. And perhaps talk about that in a bit more detail later. And then the hotel sector, I know most people in the room aren't hotel experts, and I don't claim to be either. We've only opened our first hotel on the Canary Wharf estate in the last couple of years, and we've got 2 more opening this year. But I think the really interesting trend from that is worth retailers and other parts of the market thinking about is that the days of just creating the same concept across the country and even internationally are gone. And if you look at someone like Accor, for example, I happen to know that 80% of their expansion is in their boutique hotel sector because the market wants to see different rooms, personality, variety. I mean, you're in one of the Ferndale hotels here, which is an amazing hotel and as part of a fabulous group. But that's the way the consumers are driving, and that's possibly a challenge. I'd go back to someone that presented earlier in Costa to say, wouldn't it be nice to see in an NHS hospital a Costa and another coffee shop that you perhaps could choose between the two, and you're giving people variety and the ability to upsell. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of vision of different sectors to compare.
Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Will. I think I would actually start with a trend that we're not necessarily following, which is slightly controversial, I think. So we own and manage 22 designer outlets across Europe, UK, and Canada. And I think the trend that we're not following is leisure and competitive socialising. It doesn't really fit very well within our outlet model, and we would ultimately prefer to put a retailer in that would ultimately pay more rent. And then just another kind of trend that I think we are seeing, specifically in outlet, but also more broadly, is obviously we touched on sportswear, and we've got like the trending events and categories like paddle and golf and reformer. But the other kind of interesting thing I think we're seeing is that sportswear is almost becoming like more of a fashion moment. So you're seeing that through like brand collaborations or different moments, whether that be brands collaborating or the Winter Olympics with like Moncler sponsoring Brazil and it becoming like a big TikTok trend. So yeah, different moments, but definitely sportswear shifting as a fashion moment, I think is something that's
such a good point, actually. I think we discussed in our conversation a few weeks ago Arc'teryx and how that's changed over the last few years as well. That was something, 10 years ago I was taking the mickey out of my dad for wearing, and now it's £800 a jacket in Central. Yeah.
Hi, Simon from GCW. So I won't repeat it, so I'll echo a lot of what's been said before me, but the key areas that we're looking at is wellness, and particularly everything that comes with that. And I think I'd like to separate that out from what might be the more leisure, gym-based aspects. And you look at, even somebody, Bupa, who are looking at doing something across the UK in a smaller concept, but their mind space, and how that's we're going to see more of that as we come through. Lots of those food trends. I know it's mentioned earlier about GLP-1, but that's an important thing in terms of the amount of people who are engaging with that, and therefore what do menus look like, what do occupiers look like who are serving that. Pre-loved is such a big sector that hasn't been properly captured within the physical environment, but we are really confident that that's something that's going to come to fruition as we come through. Social media and the impact of social media and trends, and what's the trend and what's the fad. Let's talk about that in a bit more detail. I think the two things that we're monitoring but not really spending too much time getting into at the moment is very much agentic shopping. It seems to be the buzzword of this year, and B&Q were announced with it today. What that's really going to mean, I think that there's a bit of a thought that it's, from my perspective, as to whether it's a little like COVID, where lots of commentators said, well, that's it, physical shopping's done, this is the thing. I see agentic shopping being a really big, high impact part around discovery, but I don't see it being the transactional element. I think that will still be a significant part in store. And then something to say that we're monitoring, but not seeing through tuition at the moment, but is around brand activation. I think that is going to be a much bigger piece of how we see brands engage with places, and I think that can be driven both by occupiers and owners as well to get the most out of their assets.
Yeah, I completely agree. If you'd asked me, I would have said ties, but I think everyone in the office knows how I feel about ties, particularly after Harry Styles last week. Simon, we had a really interesting conversation about some of your thoughts on consumer behaviour more broadly a few weeks ago. How, in your experience, are these shifts forcing placemakers to rethink some of their investment decisions right now? What do you think is misunderstood or maybe people are over-indexing on?
I think we're over-indexing on chicken. I think we're at peak chicken. I think, yeah, I'll answer the end part. I think F&B as a rule we're over-indexing on, although I can understand why. It's essential to increase dwell time. It's essential for diversity. I think the biggest challenge, and why I say I think we're over-indexing on it is without doubt the sector that has the biggest headwinds facing it and the biggest cost pressures. Yeah. So from an owner perspective, it's how do we support that to maintain that in our places while maintaining capital value? Because we have to do it because it is the right thing to do, and for the places and to attract customers. But I think that's a challenge. That's why I'd sort of answer it that way. I suppose I mentioned a second ago about social media. I think social media is the biggest change for me in terms of how that has the ability to create concepts out of nothing and the speed at which those create momentum, worldwide momentum behind them. And we talked about Labubu, and it is that challenge as to what's a fad and what's maybe something which is more of a trend. And we've definitely seen that. You said about leisure and athleisure and how that's developed. And if we look at some brands that we definitely, I think, all agree have got sustainability, whether that's something like a Skims or Gymshark. But then, how do we, if we're thinking from our owner community, how do we capture those trends and fads and put them into space? And I think there's a challenge where we need to remember that we're not always the consumer. So sometimes we can make value judgments based upon these things. So actually reliant upon data and insights that you've got, how do we create spaces to bring them to the market more quickly? The reality is that social media has created a very fickle, impatient customer, where I think sometimes as an industry, from a property industry, we can spend a lot of time considering and thinking how we're going to do it. So how have we got places within our spaces to accommodate these and create, to Jess's point, but perhaps at a different angle, which is around how do we create those pops, those things which then really grab people to come in to then spend elsewhere. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we spoke briefly about Harry Potter as well. How would you have called that trend 25 years ago? And you said, now they're opening a new store on Oxford Street with Warner Bros. And they're constantly reinventing themselves, recreating that brand to make it relevant. Stuart, what about you? Canary Wharf is obviously a very complex mixed-use scheme, and it's ever evolving. How are you investing in and choosing your tenants to drive that destination making?
Yeah, I mean, some of our team's here today, so they can probably say, I say this virtually every day of the week. But our fundamental strategy is actually pretty simple. It's get more people to come to Canary Wharf and spend more time, ideally in money, while they're there. And if you actually have that as your mentality, you can build everything around that. But I guess that's where we get paid the money to make those decisions. And it is difficult. I mean, I have a CEO who doesn't particularly enjoy my presentations where I say my gut feel. And, today everyone wants to have the data to back it up. And, CACI has obviously provided that number of cases for us. But it's judging that. But as you correctly say, we had to make a decision on the Hunger Games to co-invest with Troubadour Theatre, and it's very much a 50-50 JV. We had to analyse how big that was going to be. We didn't really know how big it was going to be, if I'm brutally honest, but we got the data to back up the story. We looked at Abba Voyage, we looked at some things happening in New York. We looked at some of the things happening in Japan and other markets around the world. So, yeah, definitely it's a combination between looking at trends, trying to interpret those trends. I think you asked earlier what's short term, what's long term. You know, that is really difficult, and sometimes you've got to do a bit of both, and try to work out what is going to be successful and what isn't. And it's the data can back it up, but you need to have gut feel as well. You need to have market research. You need to have future trends looking at it to really sort of drive it forward. And there's lots of concepts have opened, probably non-retail, I'm thinking more sort of leisure concepts, that have opened in London that we've spoken to. Some have been successful, some haven't. And again, it comes back to who's behind it, what their experience is, what their following is. I mean, more and more, the team are making recommendations to our board saying, and I think we did one the other day actually on a small unit within a food court, and actually the first recommendation was, what is the following on social media? So, I mean, it's vitally important, and I agree with a lot of what Simon just said. You know, I'm old enough to remember when a restaurant opened and you needed to go along and have the celebrity opening, getting Hello Magazine and maybe some other godforsaken title that we had at the time. It's all now about the influence. It's all about the digital footprint. We had winter lights in Canary Wharf recently. The most asked question as a steward standing by the TfL station was, where did I get the hot chocolate? Because one of our retailers had done an Instagrammable hot chocolate that everyone had to go and have. It's even more popular than where's the nearest toilet. And that's the world we live in today. You've got to have a marketing team that understand the trends, who the relevant influences are, and work with the brand to develop that.
Yeah. I mean, we're all used to seeing those long queues outside the latest TikTok trend shop. Well, the outlet strategy is probably going to be very different in terms of destination making compared to mixed use or local and high street. How are you thinking about some of these things internally at McArthurGlen?
Yeah, so what I would say is obviously to kind of try and bring it back to some of the the concept of the event, which is about needs and desires. I think so. Outlet shopping is very much desire driven. You know, you don't necessarily. You might have a specific need, like the white T-shirt example, but I suppose what we're trying to deliver when you come into one of our centres is actually that treasure hunt, that discovery to maybe be surprised by a brand, be it like a Le Creuset pan that you didn't expect you were to buy, or if we take say Carlos's example. You could be coming in for a white T-shirt, but you leave with maybe a Burberry trench at Cheshire Oaks, and so it's that kind of constant. How do we get that customer to come into the next store? How do we ensure that they are inspired by the shopping environment? And really, for us, it's focusing on the basics. Ensuring that we don't always chase frequency because we are a low frequency destination. We're very much about getting those kind of high spending customers. So customers coming from a longer drive time, spending a long time in the centre, and absolutely we need them to spend a lot of money. And that's really about ensuring that we have the right brands at the right price. And that, for me and for us, I think that is what makes a really good experience for the customer. Of course, food is important, but fundamentally we want customers shopping, engaging in our brands, and of course the food is and obviously beautifully clean toilets and lovely landscaping. All of those things are really important, and for us I think that's what we've kind of thought about and kind of defined is what makes a good experience for our customer. It's really about delivering the basics very well while also shoppers leaving with stuff that they want to buy.
Yeah.
From brands at a good price.
Handful of bags.
Exactly.
That makes everyone happy.
Yeah.
Lily, you work with some fab brands and players in the space. You probably also visit some fab brands and players. What part do you think that leisure element plays on the high street, and how do you think that's changed over time based on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on a few pieces. I guess one was sort of saying that outlets aren't necessarily leaning into participant leisure or competitive socialising. That being said, I think one of the biggest changes is retailers moving to that omni-channel experience, moving perhaps out of high streets, moving to retail parks. The nearest story to my brain at the moment is the cancer research on Ecclesall Road is moving to retail park and a bigger box format that's going to help to engage lots more audience and lots more customers. And then when we have bigger box formats, what do we put in them? And now you'll see more than ever on high streets and shopping malls, bowling alleys, go-karting, participant leisure, as well as then food halls. And these become real anchors, driving dwell time and really changing the shape of what the experience is. I think if you consider yourself and how you shop, we are convenience driven, no matter what sort of dynamic you sit yourself within. So no longer will I go out to buy a single item. However, what I will do is I'll go to meet my friend for a coffee, go to the gym. If I can pick up something or tick something off of my life admin list, I'll do that at the same time. And that's really my reason to go out. So yeah, thinking about that missions or occasions. And as everyone's been speaking about today, it's sort of flipping even in a moment from that require to a desire and kind of being able to tick them all off at once.
Yeah. Yeah, and that desire versus require point really stuck with me from today's slides, and how you have to design places that work for the same consumer when they're in want mode one day and then need mode the next. Simon, how do you do that practically?
I suppose I'd widen it out a little bit rather than it being a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
I think one person's require is another person's desire and vice versa. So there's an element of sort of democratising the place, maybe outlets slightly different, but where we are providing that variety of offer. And I think, probably I'll big up Stuart here in terms of Canary Wharf being a really good example where, historically Canary Wharf, the perception of Canary Wharf was it's very much more affluent target and serving those who are vertically above it from a work perspective. The evolution as to what's now being provided, perhaps a more democratic offer, but also engaging with leisure, means that it's pulling from a wider catchment, trading 7 days a week, much later trading hours, all of which creates a more vibrant place for the consumer and helps drive long-term sustainable rental growth. But I suppose the things I was thinking about when you were saying that about desire versus require is the consumer is no longer really ready to accept mediocre. And I think that's where we're going to see the change as we go through. And I'll give a kind of anecdotal example of this. I'm sure some data to back it up. But it's in our office, 3, 4, 5 years ago, lunchtime would have been prep bags all over the place. Yeah. We no longer see a prep bag, or it's so rare. Whereas what we see is the occasional salad project, or it's whatever that perhaps TikTokable thing has come through, or it's been generated by social media, and really high quality product as well. So we're seeing that elevation to go to that, and I think that's partly because the perceived value for the consumer of a prep meal at £9 just isn't there. So they just discard it. They will spend more, or they spend less. And I suppose for places, yes, you've got to make sure you've got the desire right. And to some extent, I think that's potentially the easier part. I think the require bit is difficult to get right, because if you take my sort of sandwich example, the require, if the right convenience, value-led perhaps offer isn't there, then the next step is it's something that's prepared at home. So you've lost that spend within your environment. And I think that's a challenge to overcome. So making sure that we've got, and there's some great examples of that. I think Co-op's most recent convenience concept is fabulous and really, really innovative for brand moving that direction. And just to echo Lily's point, I think we can't forget how the part that leisure plays in that desirability and how we deliver that. The biggest challenge around leisure is it's really expensive to deliver it. There is uncertainty about the longevity of some of these offers. So how do we make sure that the space that we've created for that operator has some flexibility to be used for something else, whatever that thing is in 18 months, 18 years' time, to be recycled?
Yeah.
Is it the new department store?
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, perhaps, yeah. I don't think it will die, but I think it evolves. I think it changes where carting is something which has come. Carting went away and it was out in the sticks in industrial parks. It's now become something which is mainstream and in environments and taking space within department stores. Perhaps with the demise of NCP, it will take some space in some of those car parks as well. But actually, is karting going to be that mainstay going forwards, or might it be more theatre-based concepts? Might it be more, I suppose an example of that is we've done a number of transactions with the Light, and they are very live to their competitive socialising offer being something that works right now, but they don't know if axe throwing and karaoke are going to be here. But so long as they've created enough power capacity, enough flexibility in lighting, design, that they can break that space up and use it for something else in the future, they've future-proofed it.
Yeah, my only challenge to that would be that the Pret's chicken satay wrap is actually quite good. So take it with a pinch of salt. Will, what about on the outlet side, to that desire-require point?
Well, just building on one of those points, I think, and we had this conversation earlier, it's like, specifically in the UK and thinking about salad, I mean, I can see the salad trend in the UK, in London. £15 for salad project, I understand it. But as you get out of the southeast or London, does that £15 salad still kind of stack up? That's not answering the question, but that is a question.
It's a great point. It's a really great point. I guess sticking with that food point, I know you're at the Food to Go conference just a few weeks ago, Lily. How are we seeing attitudes towards food spending and maybe that treat culture that you were talking about earlier change over time?
Yeah, I mean, it feeds quite nicely into sort of my aspirations for enduring trends. We presented some data there, but there was also many talks from lots of big names, either in the QSR world, as well as this sort of new emerging healthy, nutrient-based grab-and-go concepts. And I guess the one thing that kind of bridges them is that no longer we see healthy and indulgence being separate things. There's kind of three pillars that clump it all together, which is thinking about nutrients and health, consistency and reliability, and does it bring me joy? And I think that we had talks from KFC moving into cold drinks, not necessarily matcha, I don't think, but jumping on that bandwagon where alcoholic drinking culture is changing and ways to socialise are evolving. And I think that sort of the overarching thing is thinking, well, now consumers are spending less. They might be spending less on retail and going towards leisure, but even thinking about how we dine. So an evening meal at many casual dining chains or independents could be upwards of £35 to £40 if you're thinking in London before you've even had a beer or a glass of wine. What are you going to prefer? A £15 salad and then maybe a £5 drink or sweet treat. And then you feel as though you're ticking off all of those missions in one. And I think that that's something that is going to persist, especially as we've touched upon sort of the headwinds and the cost pressures that sit within the sector, meat inflation, labour costs, business rates, all of that glorious stuff. But it does impact the customer and will be one of those things that we'll have to just see pan out as the political and global.
But I think the link is that social media is creating hero products. And, I think we mentioned some area. I mean, Guinness did actually exist before the Devonshire Road competition, as anyone was wondering. But all of a sudden it became cool to, go and split the G in the Devonshire, take your picture and move on. It's the same with, there's definitely a conflict there between lots of salads coming in, but then cupcakes and buns from home and all these people doing phenomenally well. But actually the link is about social media and how you drive it. And that's why if you watch a sports event, the first advert generally to come up is a hero product, so you order immediately. If you look at Fallow in Lower Regent Street or Row in Canary Wharf, which are sister restaurants, they are phenomenally good at using social media to push a hero product for the day and drive it, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, which you start from a point of view, it's a conflict, but actually when you get your head around it, it's that hero product that's really driving their sales.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm getting the nod from Chris on timings. I do have one really quick question, if that's okay for you, Simon. Just something that, not Simon, Stuart, sorry. You
look at me and said Simon.
Throw you off there,
That means I've said too much.
One of us is insulted.
You're both fab.
Separated at birth.
Stuart, something you said really stuck with me, and you said one of your biggest challenges internally at the moment is justifying spend on insights.
Yeah.
If you were speaking to a team or stakeholders today in a room, what is the clearest business case for you on spending on insights?
This sounds like a complete advert for CACI, doesn't it? Listen, it's a very easy budget to cut. You know, those people that have gone into board meetings to go through your annual budget, it's a really easy target for a CFO or a CEO to say, really? Are you spending that much? But I mean, the key is, to me, is, I mean, you cannot know enough about your customers. So data's fantastic, but data is only good because it's always backward looking. So data is only good if you can pick up the trends from the historic data that are the trends for the future. So I was with a chief operating officer this morning for a luxury brand, and he told me the beautiful presentation that we put together, and God knows how many pages it was. He distilled that into 5 points, and that was his board approval. So I don't know if that's good or bad for CACI, but that's the reality of what it is. So I think take the trends, run it through, but then what you need to do to build trust with your board and to continue those budgets is show your return on investment. Yeah. So if I take the Troubadour example, Charlie's in the room, but Charlie and I put the board report together. We simply took the number of people in the theatre, the number of shows per week, the average spend on F&B in Canary Wharf, I think we put 25% of the people coming to the theatre, we multiplied it by the average, and that was our board approval effectively to say, we do Hunger Games, there's the model, but there's the additional spend, there's the halo effect that we're doing. What we now need to go back, and some people from CACI will have an email from me this afternoon setting out what we need to do, is then look at that in detail and say, okay, that was our overarching view, what would happen, what was the reality? Yeah. Let's look at, are people staying in hotels, are people spending longer in Canary Wharf, where are they eating, is the retail benefiting from it, and run that through. And then next time we come up with some innovative sort of concept to expand the Canary Wharf offer, then we can obviously have more detailed information and less questions on the annual budget to say, why are you spending so much on insights and data?
Yeah, that's a great example. Big round of applause for our panel today.
Thank you. Thank you.